The worst moment of my life started with my father clearing his throat. Not yelling. Not a fight. Just that quiet sound people make when they want a room to listen. And everyone did. There were about 15 of us in the living room that night. Christmas Eve. Plates still on the table in the next room. The house smelled faintly like burnt ham and cheap cinnamon candles my mom insists on lighting every year. I was halfway through a glass of wine when my father stood up. At first I didn't think much of it. Honestly, he does this sometimes. Little speeches, family updates, that kind of thing. But this one felt different. He was holding a folder. Thick, beige. The kind people bring to meetings where someone's about to get fired. I remember thinking, weirdly, that it looked too official for Christmas. Anyway, before I get ahead of myself, my name is Abigail Turner. I am 28 years old. Most of my family calls me Abby, or they used to, before things got strange between us, before I became the person everyone sighs about when my name comes up. You probably know the type. Every family has one. The disappointing one. The one who never quite figured things out. That's me, according to them. Anyway, my father's name is Frank Turner. Around Lexington, people think he's a good man, responsible, smart with money, the kind of guy neighbors ask for advice about retirement accounts and mortgages. Inside the family, his word kind of carries weight, which is why the room got quiet so fast when he opened that folder. He didn't smile, didn't make a joke. He just looked around the room the way someone does when they already know they're in charge. Then he said, calm as anything, "Tonight we need to settle something that's been hanging over this family for years." I remember laughing a little under my breath, not because it was funny, more like confusion. My sister Megan glanced at me from the couch. Her expression was tight, like she already knew what this was about. That was the first moment my stomach dropped. My father pulled a sheet of paper from the folder and held it up. "I've been keeping records," he said. Nobody spoke. Not my mom. Not my cousins. Not the aunts who normally whisper during everything. Just silence. Then my father looked straight at me. Not angry. Not emotional. Just steady. And he said, "This is a record of everything Abby has taken from this family." Nobody laughed. That's the first thing I remember. In my family, someone usually makes a joke when things get uncomfortable. My Aunt Linda will change the subject. Tyler might say something sarcastic. Someone always tries to smooth things over. But that night, no one did. My father looked down at the sheet of paper in his hand. "Let's start simple," he said calmly. "College assistance. $18,000. For a second I thought I had misheard him. What I said, he didn't look up. "Your mother and I helped you when tuition got tight." That's not Frank lifted one hand without even turning toward me. Don't interrupt. The way he said it wasn't loud, just firm enough that the room settled again. He continued reading. Car repairs. $11,000 over the years. I actually laughed. Just a short, confused sound. That never happened. My father finally looked up. His expression was patient, almost polite, the same tone he used when explaining retirement accounts to neighbors. "Abby," he said, "this isn't an argument." My sister Megan shifted on the couch. I turned toward her. "Megan, you know that's not true." I said, "You remember my car breaking down in college? I paid for that myself." She hesitated, just for a moment. Then my father kept going. Family support during difficult periods. He read, $7,500. He set the paper down on the coffee table as if he were presenting documents in a meeting. "Total," he said. Tapping the page, $36,500. The number sat in the middle of the room like smoke. I felt heat rising in my neck. "That's not real," I said. "You're making that up." My father tilted his head slightly, and my Aunt Linda leaned forward in her chair. "Well, Frank's always been careful with numbers," she said quietly. Tyler shrugged from the armchair. "Yeah, Uncle Frank tracks everything? I looked at Megan again. You know I never borrowed that kind of money, I said. She pressed her lips together. You did ask for help sometimes, she said slowly. What help, I asked. When? Before she could answer, my father stepped in. That's not even the real issue, he said. He folded his hands together. The real issue is accountability. Something cold settled in my chest. What are you talking about? He looked around the room, meeting people's eyes one by one. Your grandparents left behind a trust, he said. Not a huge one, but meaningful. My stomach dropped. And that trust, he continued, was meant to benefit family members who contribute to the family. No one interrupted him. Then he said the part that changed everything. I think it's fair for everyone here to consider whether Abby has taken more from this family than she's given. I stared at him. You're serious? My father didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the room again. If anyone here believes Abby has always been fair with this family, he said quietly, you're welcome to say so. No one spoke. Not Linda, not Tyler, not Megan. The silence said more than any vote ever could. And that's when something twisted in my stomach. Because people weren't just listening to my father. They believed him. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stood in a room where people quietly decided who you are while you were still standing there for a few seconds after my father finished talking? No one moved. Not because they didn't have opinions. Because everyone was waiting to see who would speak first. Tyler shifted in his chair. Well, he said carefully. Uncle Frank's always kept records. That doesn't mean they're real, I replied. My father didn't argue with me. That was the strange part. Instead, he simply stood there with his arms loosely folded, letting the room sit in the discomfort. It worked. People started nodding quietly to themselves. Aunt Linda leaned forward. Frank's always been responsible with money, she said gently. That's not the point, I said. The numbers aren't real. My father finally spoke again. Abby, this isn't about attacking you. I let out a short breath. Really, it's about responsibility. $36,000, I said. You're telling everyone I owe that you've benefited from this family for years, he said calmly. Name one time. I shot back. He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced around the room again, the same quiet look he gives when he's waiting for someone else to confirm what he already believes. And slowly, people began speaking. Well, Abby did move back home for a while. Someone said near the window. That was after my divorce. I said, and I paid rent. Another cousin shrugged. Still counts as help. The conversation wasn't loud. That somehow made it worse. Little comments. Quiet agreements. People piecing together a version of me that I barely recognized. That's when I realized something ugly. Most of them didn't actually know what had happened over the years. They just trusted my father's version of it more than mine. I turned toward the couch. Megan was still sitting there, hands folded in her lap. Megan, I said softly. She looked up. For a moment, I saw uncertainty in her face. You know this isn't right, I said. She took a slow breath. I think Dad's trying to talk about a bigger pattern, she said. My chest tightened. What pattern you've always needed help, she said quietly. The words landed harder than anything else that night, from who I asked. When she hesitated again, but this time she didn't back down. You expect people to take care of things for you, she said. Something inside me dropped straight through the floor. My father stepped forward slightly, as if the conversation had already reached its conclusion. You've taken from this family long enough, he said. No one challenged him. Not my mother. Not Megan. Not anyone. I looked down and realized I was still holding my wine glass. I set it carefully on the table. Fine, I said. My father frowned. Where are you going? Home. No one tried to stop me. I walked toward the front door. The house was quiet enough that I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. My hand was already on the handle when the doorbell rang. One sharp chime. Everyone in the room froze. My father frowned. "We're not expecting anyone." I opened the door anyway. Standing on the porch was the last person my father wanted to see. Daniel Brooks, my mother's brother, the uncle who hadn't spoken to this family in over a decade. He looked at me first, then passed me into the living room. "Well," he said calmly, holding up a leather briefcase. "Looks like I arrived at an interesting moment. Let me ask you something. If someone walked into your worst moment carrying a briefcase and a calm voice, would you assume they were about to help you or finish the job?" For a moment after I opened the door, neither of us spoke. Daniel Brooks stood on the porch, breathing lightly from the cold. Snow clung to the shoulders of his coat. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his beard, deeper lines around his eyes, but the briefcase in his hand looked exactly the same. "Behind me!" My father's voice cut through the room. "You shouldn't be here!" Daniel stepped inside anyway, closing the door quietly behind him. "Evening. Frank." My father didn't move to greet him. "This isn't your business." Daniel glanced around at the living room. His eyes moved slowly across the space. My aunts, my cousins, Megan sitting rigid on the couch, my mother near the fireplace looking like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Then he looked back at my father. "I heard you were gathering the whole family tonight," he said calmly. Frank's jaw tightened. "And how exactly did you hear that?" Daniel shrugged lightly. "Lexington's not a very big town." A few people shifted in their chairs. My father crossed his arms. "You haven't spoken to this family in 12 years, he said. "You don't get to walk in now and start interfering." Daniel nodded once. "That's fair," he said. Then he placed the leather briefcase on the coffee table. "But when I heard Abby's name being used as an explanation for old family finances," he added quietly, "I figured it was time to come by." The room tightened. My father let out a short laugh. "So now you're here to tell stories." Daniel flipped open the latches of the briefcase. "I'm not here to tell stories," he said. He opened the case and pulled out a stack of documents. "I'm here to correct one." Paper slid against leather as he laid the pages on the coffee table. Aunt Linda leaned forward. "What is that? Estate records?" Daniel replied. My father shook his head immediately. "Oh, not this again." Daniel ignored him. Instead, he looked at me. "Abby," he said, "you were pretty young when your grandparents passed." I nodded slowly. "I remember the funeral." I said, "Not much else." Daniel tapped the top document. "They left behind more than people realized," he said. My father stepped forward. "Daniel, you're not dragging that old nonsense into this house." Daniel continued calmly. "There was property," he said, "investments, and an education trust set aside for the grandchildren." Megan frowned. "What trust?" Daniel slid the first page toward the center of the table. $150,000, he said. The room went still. My father spoke quickly. "That money disappeared into medical bills and estate taxes." Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "That's what everyone was told." He rested one hand on the papers. "But that's not where the money went." And in that moment, the entire room leaned a little closer to the table. Because when documents start answering questions people never thought to ask, something in the family story is about to break. For a few seconds, no one reached for the papers. They just sat on the coffee table between us, as if touching them might change something none of us were ready to face. My father broke the tension first. "This is ridiculous," he said. "The estate was settled years ago." Daniel shook his head slightly. "No," he said calmly. "You told everyone it was settled." It sounded like a small correction, but the difference hung in the air. Aunt Linda leaned forward and carefully picked up the top document. "Frank told us most of the estate went to hospital bills," she said slowly, adjusting her glasses. Daniel nodded. "That's what he told everyone." My father stepped closer to the table. "You're twisting things," he snapped. "Your parents had medical costs, taxes, legal fees. Estates are complicated. Daniel didn't argue. Instead, he turned another document around so the rest of the room could see it. The total estate value, he said quietly, was approximately $1,350,000. A few people shifted in their seats. That included the sale of the house, investment accounts, and several smaller assets. Megan frowned. So where does the trust come in? Daniel tapped the second page. $150,000, he said. Set aside specifically for the grandchildren's education. Megan blinked. I never heard about that. Most of the family didn't. Daniel replied. My father spoke quickly. Because the money was gone before any of that mattered. Probate costs alone. It wasn't gone, Daniel said calmly. He reached into the briefcase and pulled out a set of bank statements. After probate closed, the estate account remained active for nearly 2 years. My father's voice tightened. That's normal. It can be, Daniel said. If legitimate expenses are still being paid. He slid the first statement across the table. Aunt Linda read quietly. Transfer. $40,000. Daniel nodded once. She turned the page. $35,000. Another page. $20,000. The numbers kept appearing, scattered across different months. Tyler leaned closer. How many transfers are there? 17, Daniel said. The room grew noticeably smaller, and the total Tyler asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. $420,000. The number landed heavily in the middle of the room. My father laughed, but the sound was thinner this time. You're implying theft now. I'm not implying anything, Daniel replied. He turned the final page toward the group. What matters is where the money went. Megan leaned forward, where Daniel tapped the destination line printed at the bottom of the statement. Frank Turner Investment Account. For a moment, no one spoke. My father kept his expression steady. Those were temporary transfers, he said quickly. I was managing the funds. For 2 years, Daniel asked. It was complicated. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, he said. It really wasn't. He rested one hand lightly on the stack of documents. When that much money disappears from an estate account, he said, people eventually start asking questions. My chest tightened. And you needed an answer ready. Daniel continued. His eyes moved briefly toward me. Someone the family already believed was irresponsible. My father stepped forward. That's not what happened. Daniel met his gaze without raising his voice. Then maybe you should explain something to the room. He tapped the ledger my father had presented earlier. When did Abby's reputation become the explanation for $420,000? And just like that, the focus of the room shifted. For the first time all night, people weren't looking at me. They were looking at my father. No one touched my father's ledger anymore. The same paper he had waved around like proof earlier now sat on the coffee table, looking smaller than it had an hour ago. My father noticed it too. He straightened his shoulders. This is nonsense, he said. Daniel's twisting numbers he doesn't understand. Daniel didn't react. Instead, he opened his briefcase again and removed another set of documents thicker this time, neatly organized with small tabs. You're right about one thing, he said calmly. Numbers do matter. He placed several pages side by side on the table. Tyler leaned forward. Those real bank statements, certified copies, Daniel said. My father scoffed. You can print anything these days. Daniel slid another document toward the center of the table. This one isn't from me, he said. Aunt Linda leaned closer and read the heading out loud. Forensic Accounting Review. The words seemed to drain some of the confidence out of the room. My father's voice sharpened. You hired an accountant to dig through family records. I hired someone to review the estate account. Daniel replied. He tapped the report. When an estate closes, the executor is responsible for accounting for every dollar. My father folded his arms. And I did. Daniel turned a page. Then this should be easy to explain. He pointed to the timeline printed on the report. 17 transfers were made from the estate account over a 23-month period. Tyler rubbed his forehead. That's the $420,000. Daniel nodded. Yes. My father stepped closer. And like I said, those were temporary transfers. I was managing the funds. Daniel didn't argue. Instead, he placed 2 documents side by side. This is the estate account transfer, he said, pointing to the first. Then he tapped the second statement. And this is your personal investment account. Megan leaned closer to the table. Daniel continued. The deposits appear in your account within 3 days of each estate withdrawal. My father shook his head. That doesn't prove anything. It proves timing, Daniel said. Megan's finger suddenly stopped on one line. Wait. She looked closer. That date. August. Daniel nodded slightly. Yes. Megan turned another page. Her voice dropped. That's when I started law school. My father spoke quickly. I paid your tuition. You remember that. She looked up at him. You said it came from your investment portfolio. It did. He replied. Daniel spoke quietly. An investment portfolio funded by the estate transfers. My father's jaw tightened. That's speculation. Daniel slid the forensic report toward Megan. The accountant compared both account histories. He said, the funds moved from the estate account into Frank's investment account, and then from that account to various expenses. Megan read silently for several seconds. No one interrupted her. Finally, she lowered the page. So, the tuition money. Daniel didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. My father tried once more. Everything I did was for this family. Daniel rested one hand on the table. That may be what you told yourself. He nodded toward the ledger. But when money disappears from an estate account, people eventually start asking questions. His eyes moved briefly toward me. So you gave them an answer. He tapped the ledger again. Abby borrowing money. He gestured around the room. Abby always needing help. Another quiet pause. Abby being the family problem. Something inside my chest shifted. Not anger. Something colder than that. Like years of confusion finally snapping into place. My father's voice sounded thinner now. You're simplifying things. Daniel shook his head. No, he said quietly. I'm explaining them. The documents remained spread across the coffee table, and for the first time all night, no one was looking at me. They were looking at my father, because there's a moment in every room like this, the moment when people stop defending someone they trusted, and start wondering if they ever really knew them at all. Nobody spoke for a long time. The only sound in the room was paper shifting as Megan picked up one of the statements. She leaned closer to the lamp on the side table. I could see her eyes moving back and forth across the numbers. Wait, she said quietly. My father stayed very still. What he said. Megan didn't look at him yet. She pointed at one of the lines. This transfer, she said. $40,000. Daniel nodded. Yes. Megan flipped the page. And this one. $35,000. Another page. $20,000. She kept reading. My father finally snapped. You don't even understand what you're looking at. Megan ignored him. She turned to the next document Daniel had laid out. What's this, she asked. Your tuition schedule, Daniel said. My father's head turned sharply. Daniel. But Megan was already comparing the pages. You paid my first semester deposit that year, she said slowly. My father nodded quickly. Yes, I told you that. You said it came from your portfolio. Megan replied. It did. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Look at the dates, he said. Megan looked again. Her finger followed the lines. Transfer from the estate account. She read quietly. She moved to the second page. Deposit into your investment account 3 days later. Another page. Payment to the university 2 weeks after that. Her face went pale. Dad, she said softly. My father forced a small laugh. You're reading too much into it. Megan lifted her eyes. Did my tuition come from Grandma and Grandpa's estate? My father didn't answer. The silence stretched longer than anything else that night. My Aunt Linda whispered, "Frank." My father looked around the room again like he was searching for allies. "You're all acting like this is criminal," he said. "I managed the estate responsibly." Daniel spoke quietly, then explained the missing $420,000. My father didn't respond. Megan's voice came out sharper this time. "Answer him." I already did. My father said, "No," she said. "You didn't." She held up the paper in her hand. "You told me you sacrificed to put me through law school." My father's jaw tightened. "I did." "Did you?" she asked. The room felt like it tilted again, because this time Megan wasn't defending him. She was staring at him the way everyone had been staring at me an hour earlier, trying to figure out if the person they trusted had been lying the whole time. My father tried one more time. "Everything I've done was for this family," Daniel said quietly. "That's usually how people justify things like this." My father glared at him. "You've been waiting years to attack me." Daniel didn't flinch. "I've been waiting years for someone to look at the numbers." Nobody argued with that. Megan slowly lowered the statement back onto the table. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Abby," she said. I looked at her. She didn't finish the sentence. Maybe she didn't know how. And honestly, neither did I. Because the sister who raised her hand against me earlier that night was gone. Now she looked like someone trying to figure out how badly she'd misjudged the person standing across the room. Let me ask you something. When the person who hurt you suddenly realizes they were wrong, does that actually fix anything? The house didn't explode that night. Nobody shouted. No one slammed doors. Instead, people quietly gathered their coats and left. Tyler was the first. "I need some air," he muttered. Aunt Linda followed a few minutes later, shaking her head. "This doesn't feel right." Even my mother slipped out without saying anything. Soon, it was just a few of us standing around at the coffee table covered in papers. My father hadn't moved. His arms were folded tight across his chest. Daniel closed his briefcase. "That's enough for tonight," he said. My father gave a short laugh. "You think any of this proves something?" Daniel shrugged. "It proves enough to ask a probate attorney." A week later, we were sitting in a quiet law office downtown. Karen Patel, the attorney Daniel recommended, reviewed the documents carefully. 17 transfers, she said. Daniel nodded. Karen looked at me. "You were never listed as receiving any of these funds." "No," I said. She turned another page. "The trust documents show you and Megan were each entitled to $75,000 for education." The number sat there on the page. Karen folded her hands. "If these records are accurate, estate funds were moved into Mr. Turner's personal investment account." My father never wanted that argument in court. Over the next few weeks, lawyers exchanged letters and numbers. Eventually, his attorney called with a proposal. A private settlement. No trial. No public filing. Just numbers. $75,000 to Megan. $75,000 to me. $180,000 to Daniel. When the documents arrived, I stared at them for a long time, because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives quietly, printed in black ink on legal paper. A year passed. Funny how life keeps moving even after something like that tears through a family. The next Christmas Eve wasn't at my parents' house. Daniel hosted it. Small place outside Lexington. Nothing fancy. The living room smelled faintly like wood smoke from the fireplace. Only 8 of us came. Tyler, Aunt Linda, a couple cousins, Megan. My mom arrived late. She stood in the doorway for a second like she wasn't sure she should be there. Daniel waved her in. "Your family," he said. She nodded quietly and hung up her coat. Nobody mentioned my father. Dinner was quieter than our old gatherings. Not tense. Just careful. Megan finally spoke when we were clearing plates. Abby, she said, I kept stacking dishes. Yeah, she hesitated. I was wrong. The words hung in the air. I didn't rush to answer. You raised your hand, I said. She nodded slowly. I know. Her voice dropped. I believed him. Everyone did, I said. She shook her head. No, she said. You didn't. That stopped me. For the first time all night, she looked straight at me. I should have listened to you, she said. I set the dishes down on the counter. Maybe, I said. She looked like she wanted to say more, but sometimes apologies run out of road. Daniel stepped in before the silence got awkward. Dessert, he announced, carrying a pie into the room like a peace offering. People laughed a little. The tension eased. My mom sat quietly near the window the whole night, watching everyone talk. At one point, she said softly, Your father didn't want to come. Nobody responded, because everyone in that room already knew something she hadn't said out loud. He wasn't invited. Later that night, when most people had gone home, Daniel handed me a small box. Found this when I was going through some old storage, he said. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph. Me and my grandparents standing in their old kitchen. I stared at it for a long moment. Tell me something honestly. When the past finally catches up to the present, how do you decide what parts of the family story you keep and which ones you let go? I turned the photo over in my hands. The paper was worn at the edges, the kind that's been sitting in a drawer for years. On the back, in my grandmother's handwriting, were a few simple words. Abby listens with her whole heart. One day that will matter more than money. I read it twice. Daniel leaned against the counter watching me. She wrote that the summer before she passed. He said, I didn't know. I replied, most things in this family weren't talked about. He said, I nodded slowly. For years I thought the problem was me, that I just wasn't strong enough, smart enough, successful enough to earn a place in that room. Turns out the truth was simpler and messier than that. Sometimes the story about you gets written by someone else, and people believe it because it's easier. Daniel spoke again. You all right? Yeah, I said, just figuring out what family means now. He smiled a little. That takes time. I slid the photo back into the box. If there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's that silence lets bad stories grow. So if something about this story feels familiar to you, don't sit on it for years the way I did. Talk about it. Call it out, because the truth doesn't fix everything, but it gives you somewhere honest to stand. And honestly, I'd like to hear what you think. Sometimes the most interesting part of a story starts after it's over.